It can be so hard doing the right thing.
Yeah, we've all been in situations where doing the right thing can actually make us feel really alone. And honestly, when we're trying to follow God and do the right thing in that way, it can make us feel really alone too.
Yeah, so in today's episode, we're going to talk about those moments where we feel alone when the odds are stacked against us as we look at a prophet in the Old Testament that was taking on an entire nation but knew that God still had his back. Welcome, everyone, to Hope Church. My name is James Furlong, and I'm Hope's digital media director, and we are so glad that you are here. Hope is the church for people that have given up on church but not ready to give up on God, and we're also a church that is perfect for someone that is exploring church for the very first time. So essentially what we like to say that no matter if your life is put together or pulled off the rails, you belong here at Hope.
What's up, everybody? I'm Michael. I am your friendly neighborhood youth pastor here at Hope Church. We have a great episode today as we are in part 2 of God of the Underdogs. Right now, taking a look at the life of Elijah and some of the crazy things that he went through in his journey with God. So we've got a pre-recorded message for you coming up right after this.
Yeah, and if you're returning to the channel, we would like it if you could like, comment, and if you have not already subscribed. That way you can help us push this content to more and more people. And if this is your first time ever joining us here on the channel, we would love to get connected with you.
Ooh, welcome.
Welcome, yeah. All you have to do is text new to the number right here on the screen. We will reach out to you privately later on during the week. Plus, we would love to send you a free gift because we just want to say thank you because you're a busy individual.
Yeah,
and this is about a 40-minute video, so thank you so much for being here.
All right now, like we said, we're going to go to this pre-recorded message, part 2, God of the Underdogs. And after that's done, come right back here because we've got some stuff to wrap up our time together today.
Good morning, everyone. So good to be able to be here with you all. Good morning to everybody who's joining us online. So glad that you are here. If you don't know me, my name is Michael. I'm the youth pastor here at Hope Church. It's so fun to be able to work with students to help them lean into Jesus, to live out that faith in everyday life, and to love everyone with grace and truth. And it was a little over a year ago, actually, that I started here, which is insane to think about where our lives have come since that last year. I remember my first day was literally helping Hope Church move out of their portable offices into this brand new building. Like, that was the first thing I got to do. They're like, here, have some heavy boxes. This is going to be great. And now just to see where life has come and the student ministry that we've got, and it's awesome. And in my own life, being able to start raising a family with my wife, and we've got our little daughter. And so if you see me yawning this morning, there's a good reason why. But it's been so crazy to think of where we are a year removed into us coming back here. And as I've been kind of reflecting on my journey as to how we ended up here and stuff, it's interesting to think that there was a point when we were considering, moving here to Oconomowoc and taking this job where I was pretty terrified to take this job. And it wasn't because of anything hope-related or anything church-related or anything like that. It really had way more to do with what we were going to lose more so than what we were going to gain. It was just crazy that. So before we came here, my wife and I, Katie, we lived in Port Washington, Wisconsin, right out on the coast. Nice little town. It's really, really cute, really beautiful. Love it. Love to visit it. But we had been there for a couple of years, and we had just started to put some roots in the ground. We had an actual house, which, now just seems kind of crazy, but we had one for some reason. We got that. We had started to make some friends. I had started to make some inroads in the student ministry I was working with there. Did I mention that we had a real physical house that we could actually live in, of our very own? It was to move and to, uproot all of that and to have to start over again for the third time in 3 years for us just seemed super daunting. And I was really nervous about, the ability to form new relationships and friendships, and do I really want to go through all of this again with another student ministry, getting to know all of this kind of stuff just made me really hesitant to give up what we had. And it would have been really, really easy to just kind of wait it out, which is what I really wanted to do, because it was one of those things of this could have been a cool opportunity, but at the end of the day, you're like, well, that would have been nice, but I guess here we are. I don't really know if we're supposed to do that. But it felt like there was just something about this that was crafted for us. So there was just, we wanted something different, whether God was really kind of orchestrating something. It felt like there was something about this that was worth stepping out into. And it would have been real easy to just wait it out. To wait in our comfort, to wait in our situation, and wait until we were, really, really 100% sure. And that's what I wanted to do, because it's so much easier to wait than it is to step out in faith. And I think a lot of us experience this, right? I think most of us, when it comes down to it, we're pretty content to wait. Right? I can wait to start my diet tomorrow. It's Saturday. Why would I do that today? That's terrifying. I can wait to start till tomorrow. I can wait to start that job search. This is kind of draining on me, and I don't really like this job, but it's the job I know, so I can wait. I can wait to talk to my parents about this thing that's going on, because they seem like they're in kind of a bad mood, and even though it's really important to me, I don't really want to get into that right now, so I can wait. I can wait to talk to my kids about this thing that's going on, because I just don't really want to fight with them. Or I can wait. We wait for so much. We wait on promotions. We wait on relationships to get better. We wait on timing to get better so that we can finally do that thing or finally have that talk. We wait for our kids to get older so that we can be present. We wait for all of these things. We wait on God to move. We wait for circumstances in life to get better. We wait and we wait and we wait. But it is seldom that we take steps in the middle of the waiting towards the thing that we're looking for. We love that verse where it talks about the fact that Moses told the people when they were kind of gathered and they were waiting on God to know what to do next. Moses said, hey, you guys just have to be still. God's going to go do some really cool things for you. All you have to do is be still. And we love that. We're like, yeah, God, go do some awesome things for me so I can just wait here and be still. But we miss that the very next verse, God says, Moses, you got to move. You got to pick up your staff and walk with me in this. We don't think about that part too much. We would much rather wait. But what if we didn't have to? What if our life didn't just have to be waiting for something to come next? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. We're in week 2 of our series here, God of the Underdogs, where we're examining the lives of a couple of people who had a lot of odds against them, and we're looking at how God was at work in their lives and how God can be at work in our own lives as well. And so today, we're going to continue the story that we started last week. We're looking at the life of a prophet who's named Elijah. And Sean talked about that last week. He was a fantastic start for some other people who were underdogs, and we saw God kind of come through in their life as well. And so we're going to pick up our story today in 1 Kings chapter 18. And so these books of 1 and 2 Kings that we're in, it really was just kind of these chronicles of these kings of Israel and Jerusalem and Judea and all these things that they were doing and what God was up to in the midst of all of these people. And today we have a lot of story to cover. It's a really long story, so I encourage you, if this is interesting to you, to go and read it on your own. I think it's fascinating. But today we're going to just kind of be talking through what happens next in the life of Elijah, because Elijah just kind of bursts on the scene. So last week he goes up to this widow, and she's about to die, and they're going to make a last meal, and Elijah's like, hey, give me some of that instead, and then you can make stuff. And we saw how God provides when we're willing to not let our lids keep us limited, but rather we give, and then God gives more and more and more. But Elijah kind of comes on the scene as a guy who is bringing some bad news. So there's this king named Ahab, and we saw last week one of the first things we see is like Elijah goes and tells this king, hey, there's not going to be any rain in the land until I come back and say so, because God told me otherwise. And then he just kind of disappears. And so I'm sure Ahab wasn't particularly pleased with him. And when we pick up our story, it's been 3 years without any rain. 3 years, and there has been no rain, just like Elijah told Ahab would happen. And Ahab is not a very good man. He's a really bad, wicked man and king, and he hasn't done a great job of leading Israel. He hasn't done a great job of really doing a whole lot, but right now his kingdom is trying to deal with this famine that has been happening because there's been no rain for 3 years, just like Elijah said. And so as we open this story, King Ahab has this advisor named Obadiah. And Obadiah is actually a pretty cool guy, even though he serves under this wicked king. He's somebody that actually follows Jesus, and he follows the Lord, and he's just trying to do the right thing. And so King Ahab, in the middle of this famine, he tells Obadiah, like, hey, you need to go and find some grass, just any grass, some patch of grass somewhere, so that our animals can eat, so that we don't have to start killing our animals. Because back in that day, like livestock and animals, it was currency, it was power, it was how you knew that you were going to be successful. And so they really didn't want to have to start killing off all of their animals. And so that's what Obadiah is kind of going out to do. He's like, okay, fine, I'll try to go find some grass that's not dead and brown and withered and whatever. And so Obadiah's going to find some grass, and he runs into Elijah, which is kind of cool because Elijah just kind of shows up here and there, and Ahab's been looking for him. Nobody's really able to find him. And so Obadiah runs into Elijah, and they have this kind of exchange. So Elijah walks up, and he says, hey, Obadiah, good to see you, man. Can you go tell King Ahab that I'm back now? And Obadiah says, absolutely not. No. Dude, you've been gone for so long. He's trying to kill you. And if I go and tell the king right now that you're back, and then we come and you're not here, guess who's going to die? This guy right here, me. I don't really want anything to do with that. I've done my part right. Like, I serve God. There was a point where Ahab went and he just killed a whole bunch of prophets that were following God. But Obadiah says, I actually found 100 of those prophets. I hid them in 2 caves so that they were safe. I've done my part for God. But right now, if you want me to go approach the king and tell him that you're back and then you're not here, I'm going to die. So no. And Elijah says, you know what? Fine, man. That's cool. I'm just going to go do this anyways. I'll do it myself. And Obadiah's like, fine, let's go. So they go to the king. Obadiah's like, hey, Elijah's here. I really hope he's here. And Elijah actually walks in this time, and he goes up to talk to Ahab. And that's where we pick up our story. It's the re-meeting of Elijah and Ahab. And this is what happens. This is starting in verse 17. So Ahab is the one who's here. He said when Ahab saw Elijah actually walk in, he said to him, is that you troubler of Israel? I have not made trouble for Israel, Elijah replied, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands, and you have followed the Baals. So Ahab sees Elijah approaching, and he's like, okay, this guy is just nothing but bad news for me. He never brings anything nice to say. And so he tries to start in with Elijah and blame the trouble on him. And Elijah says, no, I'm not the one that's doing anything here. It's actually you being a wicked and bad king and leading people astray and leading people away. Elijah calls out Ahab for what's actually going on here. The reason all of this is happening is because Ahab abandoned God as he leads the nation to worship other gods, to hang on to other things, to do whatever it is that they want, but to not follow God. And here we get a mention of the Baals. It's a god that it was called Baal. Everybody say Baal. Very nice. Baal is kind of a title that was given to these other gods from the Canaanite ethnicity, this religion. So the Baal, the god that's mentioned specifically in this story, as we'll find out later on, it's a god who is in charge of fertility, so just making sure everything grows and is doing really well and all of that. And he was the god of storms. He was the god of like weather and could, make storms and stuff like that, supposedly. And that's going to come into play later. So that's the Baal that we are dealing with here specifically. So Elijah's just kind of ready to throw down. Like last time he walked in, he's like, hey, it's not going to rain until I come back and tell you so. And now this time he's like, all right, this is what's going on. You have been leading people astray. Elijah did not wait. Elijah didn't just wait to kind of see how King Ahab played things out. God had given Elijah this task to go back and talk to the king. And so Elijah steps up into it. Elijah then, he just kind of starts calling everybody out. He's taking this mission personally. So after this little exchange, Elijah tells Ahab, hey, go gather all your people, gather all the prophets that worship Baal, gather all the prophets that worship all these other gods, and come get ready. Meet me on Mount Carmel. So Elijah's kind of just setting up this big old showdown here, and it's really interesting. He's being very bold and very forward in the way that he's going about doing this. And so after Elijah calls out Ahab and he's like, go get your people, meet me on the mountain, it's about to go down. He then turns, because all of the people of Israel have kind of been gathering at this point to watch what's about to happen, because they all know about Elijah and this guy who, made it not rain. And so they want to see how this all turns out. And so Elijah, after talking to Ahab, after telling him to go get the prophets, he turns to the people of Israel who have gathered. And he says this, and it's a verse that we get often in connection with Elijah. It's one of the more famous ones, but this is what he tells them. So Elijah went before the people now, and he said, how long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. But the people said nothing. How long will you waver? How long will you waver between two opinions? Elijah confronts a pretty complacent group of people. It's the people of Israel. They're willing to just kind of wait this out. Like, I don't really know, maybe God's real, maybe Baal is real, maybe Asher is real. He wants them to commit to his side, but they don't. Israel is content to wait. They're content to wait. And we do this too. And this is different from, if you're here and you're just kind of exploring faith, or you're unsure about God, or you're wrestling through some doubts, or you've had some situations come up, you're like, I don't really know what all this is about, and you're kind of working through things. That's different. That's good. That's normal. That's great. We're glad that you're here. But this waiting, this wavering that's talked about here, it's literally a word that means it's for somebody who's crippled and you're watching them kind of hobble along. It's how long are you going to be crippled by trying to hold on to all of this? We cripple ourselves when we keep God just kind of as an option among all the options without ever being willing to go all in on something. We hold up God to our other gods, our gods of politics, our gods of success, our gods of religious activity, and we wait. We sit just like Israel and we wait. We wait between these two opinions. We gotta waver. I don't know if God's gonna be better. Is he more real? Is he not? I don't know. And sometimes our defining moment for if we think that God is better is if God doesn't come through in the way that I want him to come through, or if he doesn't resolve this issue in my timing, or if he doesn't work the way that I kind of want him to work things out in my life, or as I hope, then maybe God isn't worth it right now. And we drop him back into the bag with all of our other options, and maybe he's not real, or maybe he's just not really worth my time right now. So we drop him and we go back to waiting. And maybe there's a situation that necessitates picking him back up again, giving this another try, dusting it off and seeing if this is worth it, but we waver. We wait. And we're never really quite willing to step up, to step in, to go all in and legitimately give it a try to see what it looks like to be in relationship with God. We give him these one-off moments, and then we go back to waiting. Saying, well, maybe. But unfortunately, it's not how God works. That's not who he is. There's a point in the Bible where Jesus literally says, like, I would rather that you outright hate me and stand by that than just be kind of lukewarm and wishy-washy about everything. Like, this is Jesus who, like, wants people to come to him and to be in relationship with him and to know him. He says, I would rather you either, like, be devoted to me or just admit that you're not on board with this than just kind of do this weird little dance in the middle. It's what the people of Israel were doing, and if we're honest, that's sometimes what we do. I know it's something that I've done as I was trying to figure some things out. I just wanted to keep God as a cosmic backup plan instead of being willing to see what it would really look like to be in relationship with him. But Elijah says that's not going to cut it today. Today, you can't just sit there and hold on to God as a cosmic backup plan while you try to figure out if any of these other gods are worth it more. And today, maybe even is a day for us to maybe not hold God as that backup plan, but to really go all in, to step up like Elijah's doing here, to see what does it look like to trust and really go after God. Elijah gets this. He didn't wait on God to do some big reveal, to really show himself. Elijah's been walking with God, and he has stepped into situations and seen God come through. And so in this moment where God's like, hey, I need you to step up into this and help other people out, he says, yeah, we're going to do this. He doesn't try to bargain with these other gods. He doesn't try to bargain with these other prophets and be like, oh, maybe there's something that Asherah has to say that I haven't heard before. Like, he trusts God, and he's willing to commit to this. He's going to step up into what God gives him to do, and he's going to trust that God is going to come through. And so Elijah calls out the people of Israel. He's got the prophets all there at Mount Carmel. He's got the people there now watching, and they're just kind of like, we don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And he's like, you know what? Forget you guys. We're going to do this. And so after this, Elijah says, you know what? It's time. We're going to set the stage for what is about to happen right here. And what happens is it feels like, it should be some sort of like mini HBO special or like some sort of fantasy movie, because what you get is like a pretty classic God's showdown. Elijah's like, we're going to set up two altars. There's going to be one right here for God. There's going to be one right here for your guys' God, for Baal. There's going to be two sacrifices on those altars. You can kind of see where this is going, right? Like, okay, whichever God burns up their sacrifice, that's the true God. And everybody's like, yeah, that makes sense. Sure, cool, let's do it. But I want to point out something really interesting. And so as Elijah is starting into this journey, he's like trying to tell the people what to do. He starts off his speech by making a very pointed statement. And it's found in verse 22 here in 1 Kings 18. He starts off with this very dramatic statement. He says, I'm the only one. I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left. That's where Elijah's at right now. He feels pretty alone. And I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling, especially if we've tried to step into what God has called us to, or we've tried to honor him in those situations. Elijah says, like, I'm the only one left who's trying to do what's right, who's trying to do what's good. And I mean, he probably felt that way, right? He's looking around and he sees all these prophets over here who have abandoned God, and he sees a king who's abandoned God, and he looks at the people of Israel and they aren't really making any choices either. And he said, I'm the only one. I'm the only one trying to do what's right here. But what makes this interesting is that that's not necessarily true. Because you see, before he was talking to this guy named Obadiah, right? And Obadiah was serving the Lord. And so Elijah's not alone. There's at least two. But then Obadiah, in the course of his conversation with Elijah, he says this just a few verses earlier as he was trying to make his case for not dying today. He says, I've done some good things. I hid 100 prophets of the Lord in 2 caves. Says Obadiah, and then there's at least 100 more people who are with Elijah still, who are doing the right thing, who are trying to take this stand. But it's hard. It's hard to see that. It's hard for Elijah when he's standing on that mountaintop and seeing so many people against him. It's hard to remember those kinds of things. And it brings us to, if you're following along your notes, this is kind of our first fill in the blank for the day. It's the fact that it's hard to see the big picture when we are in the big picture. Makes sense, right? It's hard to see the big picture when we are right in the middle of it. It's hard to see all the things that are being orchestrated and going on when you are right in the middle of the storm. So I want to just take this moment as a maybe a reminder for some of you, maybe as news to others of you. But like, if you're here this morning and you happen to be going through it, you know what that means. You know what it means to just be going through it sometimes. Like, if you're here and that's just where you're at, like, you are feeling that weight. You're like, I'm trying to stick it out in whatever situation it is, and I am just feeling alone. I am on that mountainside right there with Elijah saying, I'm the only one. I really want and hope that you would know that this is a place where you are not alone. Because everybody who's in here, everybody who's watching, we are all people who have been through it, who are going through it, who are working through things in our lives. We all have stories of struggle and triumph and moments where we're feeling alone. And so I really do hope that, if you're here and you don't know what's coming next, or you're trying to step into what God's calling you to and you don't really know what that looks like, or if you're here and you're like, I don't even know what following God really looks like, and in that I feel kind of alone, I want you to know you are not alone. This is a place for all of us to be and to belong. I really hope and pray you can find community here. We have so many different ways for you to be able to do that, to find people so that you can know in those moments where you're feeling alone that you're not. You're not alone. Even if you're, not able to be here, if you're watching online, like in today's day and age, we've got that kind of digital community as well, where you guys aren't alone. We're all in this as a community together. I hope that the more that you're here, the more and more and more that you're able to find those people and connect with those people and realize that you're not necessarily alone. But we want to recognize that this is a pretty common thing to feel. It's hard to see the big picture when we're right in the middle of it. It's hard for Elijah to feel that way, right? It's so easy when you're caught up in moments to forget and to be able to recall and remember, no, I'm not alone. I've got people around me who love me, who care about me. If Elijah had slowed down for a moment, maybe he would have remembered that Obadiah was with him. Maybe he would have remembered that these other prophets were out there with him, but he is right in the middle of it. He is trying to do good things, but he feels it. And we do too. And so what happens next is kind of the fun part of this. So Elijah tells the prophets to go first. All these prophets of Baal, the prophets of Asherah, he's like, all right, y'all get to call on your God right now. Do whatever it is you got to do. And when evening comes, we'll see if this sacrifice gets burnt up. And so they go first, they prep their sacrifice, they start calling on their God, and nothing happens. And so now Elijah's starting to feel pretty good about himself. And so Elijah starts insulting their God, which, like, if you're talking to people and you're trying to make a point, please don't insult them to make your point. That's probably not a good way to go about doing things. Would not recommend that from the life of Elijah. Do not insult people, please. But Elijah, he's caught up in the moment. We can forgive him for that, right? And so he starts insulting their God. He starts saying things like, well, maybe your God had to go to the bathroom or something, or maybe your God is asleep and he went through his alarm, like literally things like that. It was kind of childish, but it was also like his best way to insult them, because in that day and age, it was super insulting to imply that gods had to do like normal human things. And so Elijah's like, maybe your God hit the snooze button too much. And we're like, Elijah, come on, man, that's not cool. That's kind of where he's at right now, right? And so he's insulting, Baal, this god of storms who can't cause lightning to come down from heaven and burn up this sacrifice. It's not a good look for him. They're really struggling because they don't know where their God is. And, this should have been right up his alley as a storm god, because a lot of people think that, when you call down fire from heaven, that was maybe most likely just lightning. And so for a storm god, it's like easy, but it's not. And so this is what the prophets of Baal continue to do. They shouted louder, and they slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, which is terrible to think about, that this is like what was normally required of them, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. And so Elijah insults them and their God, and their response is to try more and to try even harder, but there's no response. Nobody answers. No one pays attention. And it's crazy to think that that's what Baal required of them, because it says it was their custom to cut themselves in order to arouse and get their God to do what they wanted him to do. That's what he wanted, for them to exert themselves to a point of self-harm and physical anguish, to literally just give all of themselves for nothing, for no answer. And that's what happens when we choose to give ourselves to these other gods that we worship other than the God. This is what gets demanded of us too. There's no guarantee that these other things that we're worshiping are going to come through. And so when we're out chasing these other gods, these gods of politics, these gods of religious activity, these gods of wealth and status, of social justice, of pleasure, of freedom, when we chase all of these other things, we end up putting everything on the line in pursuit of them. Our own jobs, our mental health, our sanity, our families, our finances, our peace, our joy, as we're trying to appease and pour everything into these other gods. And then in the moment where we finally think, I can lean back on this and it's going to support me and it's going to give me that fulfillment that I need, they don't show up. There's no response. Nobody answers. Seems like they weren't even paying attention to begin with. And it's because when our gods don't show up, when the things that we give our time and our energy and our effort and our attention to other than the God, when they don't show up, we get messed up as a result. And our families get messed up as a result, and our inner lives get all out of whack as a result. And if you're following along, this is our next fill in the blank here. When our gods don't show up, we get messed up as a result. Putting everything that we've got into the God of politics isn't going to save us. Putting everything that we've got into the God of doing lots and lots of just good things in my life to even out the scales, it's not actually going to give us that deep fulfillment that we're really looking for. Putting everything that I've got into, I can do whatever I want and nobody can tell me otherwise as long as I'm okay and happy. I might be happy for a little bit, but ultimately, I'm not going to have joy. I'm not going to have long-lasting peace. We give and we give and we give to these things, and they don't give back. Nobody answers. Nobody's paying attention. Nobody listens. And that's what these prophets did. They gave and they gave and they gave and they gave and they gave, and the time came and nobody answered. And then it was Elijah's turn. And so Elijah goes and he starts to build his altar, and you can go read about it. He weaves in all of this historical significance from the nation of Israel and the things that God has done for them in the past as he builds this altar. And then, as he gets it all ready and he puts a sacrifice on top, he tells a whole bunch of people, hey, I need you guys to go and dump some water on this. And they're like, okay, I guess. And he's like, all right, now I need you to do it again. And I need you to do it again. And I need you to do it again. And as we know, when something is really, 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 really wet, that makes it kind of hard to start on fire, doesn't it? Just a little bit. Just a little bit. But this is, again, something that God has called Elijah to step up into. And at that point, Elijah's probably like, okay, this seems like you're going a little far here, God, but I'm going to step up into this anyways and trust that you're going to come through, because if you don't, this is going to look real bad for me, that not only do I have my own sacrifice, I now have my own very thoroughly drenched sacrifice that would be pretty impossible for me to start on fire. So in that, he's done all of that. But all failed. Those prophets are sitting down, they're failed, and now Elijah steps up and he prays. And this is what he prays. So it said, at the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed. Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and all of Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and I've done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Answer me, God, so these people will know that you are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Not that so that I can be proven right, not though so that Elijah looks really, really cool in this moment right now. Elijah doesn't lose sight of what's going on here. Doesn't lose sight of what's happening. He doesn't cut himself. He doesn't throw himself into a frenzy. He doesn't pray some really long, elaborate prayer that has all the right words that unlocks God's ability to do something. He doesn't say, hold on, guys, I'm going to go to church first for a year's worth of Sundays and have that perfect attendance and unlock that one favor from God that I get. He doesn't do any of that. He just steps up into the situation and prays that God would show up however he will. And that's kind of the secret to Elijah's confidence here in this prayer. His prayer asks that God would show up, not how Elijah wants him to, even though I'm sure Elijah has some preconceived notions as to how he wants this to go down. He says, God, I want you to show up so that people will know who you are and that their hearts will turn back to you. That's all I want. You can do it however you want. I don't really care how this goes down, but God, show up so people will know that you are God. Doesn't manufacture anything. He doesn't try to force anything. He doesn't have like a lit match behind his back in case this doesn't go right and he can just kind of throw it over there. He says, God, show up. Do what you will. And this is what happens. Then the fire of the Lord fell. Just notice this. Burned up the sacrifice. That makes sense. Burned up the wood. Also makes sense. Burned up the stones. Burned up the soil. And because God was maybe feeling a little extra that day, it also licked up all the extra water that was in the trench as well, because of course, fire can burn up water. Why not? And when all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. And so this very, very, very drenched and wet sacrifice, God comes through and he says, all right, this storm God, he couldn't burn up the sacrifice. I'm going to burn up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the ground, and the water, because why not? Because I'm God, and I can do that. So God shows up in a pretty major way here, and it is awesome. And of course, the people are like, yep, that's it. The Lord is actually God. Yay, this is cool, right? God does what the storm God could not, and he does it. Just a little bit of flair and pizzazz, because, that's how cool God is. But this is what Elijah gets to witness, right? Elijah probably couldn't have even predicted all of that to happen. Elijah just was there and he stepped up and he trusted that God was going to show up, and he did, and it was awesome, and the people believed. That's what we're called to do. We don't need to manufacture any cool events. We don't need to, set up these big, elaborate scenarios and get out ahead of God and then just really hope and pray that God comes through. All of what Elijah did was because God asked him to. And so when we walk with God, this is kind of our big idea for the day, when we walk with God, all we have to be willing to do is step up and let God show up. All we do is step up and let God show up. Because when we rely on our own strength, when I rely on my own power, Michael's own ability to get things done, when I lean back on the gods that I feel like maybe I can trust and worship, I end up broken. We end up spent. We end up unsure of who we are. But when we're able to walk with God, when we're able to trust him, when we're able to step up into those little situations, because it's not always going to be these Mount Carmel, big mountaintop type moments, we step up and we let God show up so that the people can see him, so that we can see him for who he really is. Because I don't want to rely on myself. I don't want to rely on the gods that I've been trying to follow all along. We don't want to rely just on these things that give us no answer, that nobody hears, that nobody's even paying attention. The God of alcohol isn't going to provide peace like the God of Elijah is. The God of work isn't going to provide that sense of purpose like stepping up into what it is that the God of Elijah is calling you to do. The God of vanity or appearance isn't going to give that real sense of love or validation like walking in step with the God of the universe who created you and loves you and wants to be with you. So when we rely on our own gods, when we rely on ourselves, we come up short, we get messed up. But when we step up, little by little, time by time, moment by moment, and let God show up, the more we start to see who he is, the more we start to see his beauty and the way he really is present in all things. There's going to be times then as we learn to follow God where it doesn't go the way that we want, where it doesn't feel like this worked out quite the way I envisioned it, where maybe I didn't really have all of the words that I thought I would, or I didn't really articulate that very clearly, or I thought I was trying to be loving, but maybe came across a little bit mean. But the more that we step up and let God show up, the more we learn what he's like and who he is and how he speaks to us, and the more confidence we can have time and time and time again to step up as we let God show up. And that's all Elijah did. Elijah faced down these prophets of Baal and Asherah, and he was an underdog, right? He's looking around, and he doesn't see anybody that's on his side. But he knows that God has called him to step up, and so he did, and he wanted God to show up, and God did, and the people believed. But there's somebody else who's faced down great odds before and called on God in a moment. And God had asked him to step up, and he asked God to show up. And when Jesus was alive and when he was on this earth, the Son of God, fully perfect, fully God and fully man in the flesh, when he was here and he was living his perfect life and showing people how to live and how to love in a way that was so different and so radical, and how to relate to one another and how to be in relationship with God, and then he was put to death for it. When he was hanging on the cross, he asked God to show up. He prayed, God, where are you in this moment? And for one moment, Jesus was actually alone. And there was no answer because of what needed to be done and the price that needed to be paid. But in that moment, Jesus was willing to be alone. God left Jesus alone on the cross so that we would never have to go through life alone again. That's why we get to step up and ask God to show up, is because when we surrender to what it is that Jesus has done and the fact that he wants to be with us so desperately and he wants to walk alongside us, when God calls us to step up and we're willing to, we get to see him show up because we have a way to be able to be with him again, and that's through the person of Jesus. And I've seen this play out for myself. I'm glad that I stepped up. That I wasn't willing to wait in my comfort and my security and just, let these opportunities pass me by. But when God said, hey, I'm going to need you to step up into something new and different and a little bit scary, we did. And yeah, I might have lost, a house, but we gained a home and a community that we absolutely love. And yeah, I might have been a little bit scary to have to, try to make friends and stuff again, but God's given some incredible people that have come around us. And the student ministry here has some really awesome students that I now get to lead and shepherd and help them to move towards Jesus. I'm so glad that we stepped up and let God show up. And he has been showing up ever since we've come out here, over and over and over again. And now people get to see just how good he really is. So as we wrap up our time today, I just want to ask you, what's your Mount Carmel? What's your moment where God is calling you to step up so that he can show up and people can just see how amazing he is? And for some of you, you might not even be on board with God yet. You might not even know where you stand on any of this, and you're still trying to search and you're still trying to figure out. That's okay. You too can step up and allow God to show up for maybe the first time. And so if you're here and that's you, I would challenge you to step up by joining our Starting Point group. Starting Point is a starting point place for your faith. It's where you can bring all those questions, all those doubts, all those things that are just kind of swirling around and holding back. And like I said before, you are not alone. And we've created a community here where all of those things are actually genuinely welcome for discussion and discourse as we're all kind of moving towards God together. It's a beautiful thing. And so I challenge you, even if you're like, I don't really know about God. I don't know if he's real. Don't just be crippled by that indecision, but allow God a chance to show up and be who he really is as you step up and join Starting Point. And for some of us in here, we would say that we walk with God. We would say that we follow him and that we trust him. But when it comes down to it, there's some things where we're kind of relying on ourselves, where we're kind of relying on those other gods that we kind of keep in the back pocket instead of fully trusting in God. And so for you, I would say step up and fully trust in God in those areas and not in your own gods. Fully commit and give something to God that you've been holding back from him. Have a conversation that you've been avoiding. Maybe you've been feeling this pull to really give of your time and effort and you've been kind of holding that back. Get involved. Maybe you don't particularly trust institutions and you don't trust God with your finances in those ways and you need to give more. Maybe you just need to go have a conversation with somebody that you have been avoiding because you don't really know how it's going to go and you don't want to step into that. Step up and fully trusting God and stop relying so much on those other things. We want to pray that we can step up so that God can show up and we can see the difference, and that people can see God. And so today as you leave, if you'll notice, if you've got notes, there's a little QR code on there. We're also going to have one on the screen. We, in our digital age, just trying to do some fun, different things. So we created a little wallpaper just to help remember this prayer of Elijah so that we can kind of keep this going throughout the week. And so you're welcome to grab that if you so desire. If you're online, there's ways for you to grab that as well. But it just says, help me step up so you can show up and people can see you. That was Elijah's prayer on the mountainside, that God, I have stepped up like you've called me to. Now show up so that people can see you. And as we're going throughout our weeks, whether you're looking at this little reminder on your phone or if you're just kind of thinking about these things, let's let that be our prayer, that we could step up as God prompts us to. When we feel those little nudges, even if we feel like we're all alone, let's step up and just see how God is going to show up next. Let's pray. God, I thank you that you're a God who does want to be near to us, that you don't leave us alone. I pray in whatever situation it might be, even if it's just coming to know you, that you would help us to step up so that we could watch you show up, so that people could see you and know you and love you and be loved by you. Help us to know if we're going through it that we're not really alone, but that we have people around us who love us and care about us, and that we can join those communities and be edifying one another, lifting each other up instead of feeling like we're on the outs looking in. For all of us as we go this week, help us to be aware of the places where you're asking us to step up so that you can amaze us and wow us and show up in ways that we could never imagine. In Jesus' name, amen.
So, Michael,
Yes.
You've got to be feeling a little bit like an underdog. You and your wife just welcomed your newborn baby to the world,
we
Naya.
did. Yes, Naya Simone. She is awesome. But yeah, I feel that a little bit. I've been doing student ministry for 6-7 years now, and so working with other people's kids is fine. It's natural. But when the hospital says, here you go, here's your own child, goodbye, see ya.
After a couple hours, you can't go back to the hospital and be like, hey, so
What do I do? Like, yeah, not really. You're on your own. And so, yeah, I feel that a little bit. There's nights where it's just like, what do we do? Like, how many people do we call somebody? I don't know. It's a whole different world to have a kid of your own. Yeah. Definitely feel like an underdog a little bit of like, I wasn't as prepared for this as I thought I would be.
Well, I can't give you any tips. I only own dogs. But no matter who you are at home, whether you're single or a parent or just somebody that's trying to figure out if God is real, we understand that there's going to be times in your life where you feel like an underdog. The odds are stacked against you. And we here at Hope Church want to be going through those seasons with you.
Absolutely. Like we talked about today, right? It's hard to see the big picture when you're in the big picture, but you are not alone. And we really want to hopefully help you feel like you've got a community here of people who love you and care about you and want to come alongside you, because we're all going through it at different points in life. And so if you've got stuff that's going on, if you have things you need prayer for, things you want to talk through, we've got some people that can help you with that, right? Yeah, we've got a link down below in the description. If you click that, you can fill it out and somebody will get back to you to be coming alongside you, to pray for you, even to pray with you if you want. And if you don't really know how to pray or how to start going about doing that, we'd love to be able to help you with that as well.
Yeah, another great resource that we're going to leave for you is in the top corner here. You will see it for our first week of a series called Grown Up Prayers. That was a 6-week series that if you have time for during this week to check out, we would encourage it because it's a breakdown, and it's a perfect breakdown for everyone, whether you're new to the church or someone that's been a part of the church for a long time. I know that I've been at the church for the last 8 years, and there was a lot of things that I've been learning that I didn't realize about prayer. So it's a great series, so be sure to check that out. And if you'd like to connect with us throughout the week, you can always DM us or hang out with us. We're always posting on Facebook and Instagram, so you can come and hang out in the comments, like our stuff if you so choose so, but just find us at Hope Lake Country on both of those platforms. So next week's going to be the third week. So what are we going to expect from that?
Yeah, next week we're going to pick up the story of Elijah after this big old mountaintop moment. He has conquered. God came through. He stepped up. God showed up. It was great. And then real life sets in again. And that's kind of how it is for all of us, right? We feel like we have these moments of clarity, these moments of victory, and then you just head right back down again. You're like, what the heck happened? And so that's what Sean's going to talk to us about next week is what do we do in those moments where we feel like we've done everything right, and yet it doesn't seem like something quite clicked.
It's going to be a great episode, and we have 4 ways for you to join us for a live service. If you happen to live in the Lake Country area, you can join us on a Thursday night at 7 p.m. Very low-key Thursday night services. Super chill. The coffee's still brewing, though, so we enjoy that. But Sunday mornings, we have 2 services, one at 8:30 and the other at 10:15 in the morning. Our Hope Kids is also open for anyone that's 4 weeks until 4th grade.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be awesome. We love Hope Kids here. Or if no matter where you live, you can join us right here on YouTube. We go live every Sunday morning, 8:30 Central. You can connect with our chat host. We also have a growing community that you can engage with. Plus, if you really love music, you do not want to miss our worship team. They are so many talented people here at Hope Church, and we would love to share their gifts with you. So thank you again for being here, and we will see you on the next episode. But until then, have a great week.
See you next week.